Hey there, welcome to SI Now. It is Friday, December 2nd, and I'm Maggie Gray. Albert Chen will join me to tee up Major League Baseball's hot stove season. But first, the Cowboys won their 11th straight game Thursday against the Vikings, but it was not without controversy. For more, here's Ryan Aselta and Super Bowl champion Chris Canty. Gentlemen.
All right, thanks, Maggie. We're going 4 downs with Chris Canty as Week 13 in the NFL officially got underway last night, and Big D survived some big defense from the Minnesota Vikings as the defense gave Dak, Zeke, the rest of the Cowboys a solid test, but the Cowboys do hold on for a 17-15 win on Thursday Night Football. Dallas now 11-1, but Chris, what did the Vikings do that may have given the rest of the league a glimpse of maybe how to beat the Dallas Cowboys team?
Yeah, the Cowboys 11-1, only the second time in franchise history, but I think the Vikings established somewhat of a blueprint in terms of how to beat the Cowboys. They held them to 1 of 9 on third downs. They held them to 264 total yards of offense. That's flat out balling if you consider what you're talking about in today's NFL with the rules and all of the things structured in order to give the offense an advantage. You certainly saw the pressure that defensive front was able to put on Dak Prescott, but yet this Cowboys team just continues to find a way to make plays. These young guys, the moment is never too big for them. They're poised, they're confident, even with the 2 turnovers, the one early in the game by Ezekiel Elliott. They are accountable, they accept the blame for it, they just continue to move forward. The Cowboys still were able to run the ball effectively, 5 yards a carry, which is impressive. They were 2 for 2 in the red zone. So I think the Vikings established somewhat of a blueprint in terms of being able to run blitz on early downs and distances, get the Cowboys off schedule, but they just weren't able to finish the drill last night. This Cowboys team is going to be a tough out.
Hey, a win is a win. They move on now 11-1. The referees, though, in the spotlight again, Chris. A missed call as late as you can in this game. The 2-point conversion that would have tied the game for the Vikings. Sam Bradford clearly hit in the face. The refs just didn't call it. What are the referees looking at right there?
It's another blown call, and it's inexcusable, certainly in that situation. 2-point conversion, the game is actually on the line, and you see everything that's at stake there in terms of the Minnesota Vikings competing in that NFC North. They're right now looking at the Detroit Lions, the Green Bay Packers. This is a competitive division coming down the stretch. Every game matters, and in that situation, to decide the game, you miss a call that's so obvious, so blatant. It doesn't help the Minnesota Vikings in what took place last night, and that's the disappointing part about it.
All right, second down, marquee game of the weekend. Big Ben versus Eli in Pittsburgh. Steelers are going to host the Giants. New York enters the game on a 6-game winning streak. Roethlisberger has been almost perfect at home this season, Chris. 15 touchdowns, just 2 picks. How do you see this game against 2 of the big-time franchises in football going head-to-head on Sunday?
Well, you hear a lot about Ben Roethlisberger, and you hear a lot about Antonio Brown and those guys being dynamic playmakers, and rightfully so. But this team runs through number 26, Le'Veon Bell. He just presents so many different problems for your defense in terms of how you're going to defend them. If you go in a nickel defense to try to make sure that you can cover him out of the backfield, you're going to be light inside the box on your defensive front, and they're just going to take advantage of it with the run game. Their defense has come alive of late, 16 sacks in the last 4 ball games. So that's impressive to see what they've been able to do on that side of the ball. Second-year defensive coordinator Keith Butler getting things under control with that young, talented group. If they continue to trend up, and then Big Ben and company continue to do what they do, this is going to be a tough team to stop.
All right, let's move on to third down. When surgery truly cuts like a knife, we're going to talk about 2 surgeries announced yesterday, one with immediate impact, one with a little more long-term effect. Let's start in New England. Rob Gronkowski will have back surgery today. He's expected to miss the remainder of the season. Chris, how can the Patriots survive without Big Gronk?
Well, I think their personnel to be able to do so. They've got Martellus Bennett, one of the best inline blocking tight ends in the National Football League, and he's also a threat down the field in the vertical passing game. You look at Chris Hogan, you look at Danny Amendola, you look at Julian Edelman. They've got enough weapons on the offensive side of the ball to do what they want to do in the passing game. And then, of course, you got LeGarrette Blount. The New England Patriots are at the top of the league in terms of rush attempts. They want to be a run-first offense. I think they learned their lesson from last year's AFC Championship game, being so one-dimensional, not leaning on the running game, not having any balance on the offensive side of the ball. The Denver Broncos were really getting after them in that game. So I think that's the approach that this New England Patriots team in 2016 is going to take to have success in December and January. We always talk about it. You got to be able to run the ball and have balance, be able to control the clock in late in the season in the National Football League. So I think this team can do that. Of course, Rob Gronkowski is a dynamic player. He's a big part of what they want to do on the offensive side of the ball. But Bill Belichick, Josh McDaniels, they'll find a way to overcome this loss. They always do, and they'll keep moving forward.
In Chicago, the Bears announced that Jay Cutler's going to have season-ending shoulder surgery. This really could mark the end of Cutler's time in Chicago. The guaranteed portion of his contract ends after this year. If they do part ways, where's a good fit for possibly Jay Cutler landing for the last couple years of his career?
Well, you're looking at a quarterback-starved league, so you're looking at teams that need a quarterback that are going to be transitioning from the position. The New York Jets come to mind when you think about it. But you mentioned it, Jay Cutler. He's got a $16 million cap number in 2017, but only a $2 million dead cap number. This is probably the end of the road for Jay Cutler in Chicago. He's already got 2 coaches fired. I don't think John Fox wants to make it a third. So I think it's a situation where the franchise is going to be looking to move on from him. So they've got to find some answers at the quarterback position themselves. But I think they're set on Jay Cutler not being the quarterback in Chicago next season.
All right, let's go to fourth down. You mentioned it earlier. The league's official reversal. Troy Vincent announced that the NFL plans to hire 17 full-time officials for 2017. Chris, is this a difference maker? We saw issues last night. Could full-time referees, have helped make that call, make the correct call in last night's game, possibly?
Well, I think, anytime you have an opportunity to do something more often, you're going to be better at it. And so when you make the officials full-time, I think you take away the conflict of interest in terms of what other priorities or what other responsibilities they have during the course of their regular work week. I think the more time that they have to focus on football, to focus on seeing all the calls, understanding the group and how they need to work together as a team to make sure that they get the calls on the field right, I think the better at it they'll be, the more they're around it in terms of being at practices during OTAs and mini camps and training camps. I think they'll be better at it, but also the players and the coaches will be better at understanding what are fouls and how to execute their jobs and their responsibilities as well. So I think it's a win-win situation for the league if they decide to go down this route.
One thing that's really not up for debate, the more time they spend on their craft, that's a good thing.
That's a good thing.
Anyway,
Either way.
Spend it. Good thing also, Week 13 is here in the NFL. A lot of big ball games. We're looking forward to that. Maggie?
Thanks, guys. If we're talking baseball in December, it's something big. Albert Chen is here to dive in. And Albert, there are reports that the Pirates and Nationals could be in talks to trade former NL MVP Andrew McCutchen to D.C. Now, the Pirates have made the playoffs 3 out of the last 4 years. Why do they want to part ways with McCutchen?
It's a good question. I mean, you look at where the Pirates now, bigger picture, they did take a step back this year, but you're also in a division with the Cubs, a growing juggernaut. They're already there, and you have to assume the Cubs are going to just churn out these 100-win seasons. There's the Cardinals in that division. That is a tough task to really kind of break through with a postseason berth there. The Pirates view this as an opportunity to do something bold and big, which is what they need to do. McCutchen, 30 years old, you could argue sort of in the prime, but he took a big step back this year. Very simple question. Was last season in which he struggled, worst offensive season of his career, was it an aberration, or is he still that potential star who can really kind of get back to that R-star level?
Can they get back enough to really compete with the Cubs?
Well, we've seen in these packages in the past that, look, if you can get 2 or 3 sort of young major league ready players, I think they can. Now, do remember, that's a good point because McCutchen, he's only owed $14 million next year. So he's got a very team-friendly contract. But you're the Pirates, and you are not a big market team. If you can save a few $1 million here and there, that is a massive difference for a team with a small payroll. So, yeah, I think there could be a deal out there that makes sense.
Okay, let's talk about from the national side, the team with the highest expectations, I think, of any team in Major League Baseball. Their perennial playoff team lost to the Dodgers in the most recent postseason. What would McCutchen give to them?
Well, he would give them a lot. And, you mentioned teams, having packages of prospects and the Nationals have that, but they also have the great need for this guy. This was an offense that just was not what we expected last season. I think it'll be better next year because Bryce Harper will be better, but they need another impact player in the lineup, and McCutchen can be that guy. But I think the key here is they need someone in center field to answer a lot of questions that they have. Now, is Trey Turner, who was absolutely spectacular last season as a rookie, they want him to be at shortstop where he can be a superstar. This will really solve that question. He doesn't have to play center field. And McCutchen really, you look at the Nationals, they really are a perfect fit here.
They're in win-now mode. They have been in win-now mode. This would just be another signal of that. Okay, if you were a league GM, what's a deal you want to get done outside of now Cespedes is back with the Mets, and if McCutchen goes to the Nationals, give us another deal.
Well, looking at sort of a bigger deal that can really shake up the landscape, Chris Sale is a really interesting name here. And I do think the White Sox, if the right deal presented itself, would deal him. We talked about the Nationals. He would be a great fit there. The Dodgers are looking for a starter to pair with LA. I would like to see this deal simply because Chris Sale is one of the unsung stars in the game, and it's kind of a shame that these years he's yet to pitch in the postseason. Would love to see him pitching in big games in October, and I think the best opportunity for that would be on another team.
Okay, we know that all this wheeling and dealing takes place at the winter meetings. It's happening next week in sunny Maryland, so we're looking forward to that. Let's take a walk down memory lane, maybe some recent memory for your top 3 deals made in the winter meetings of all time. Give us number 3 on your list, third most impactful winter deadline deal.
Yeah, well, you don't have to go too far back. Yeah. I mean, Max Scherzer going to the Tigers in that big 3-team deal that really actually worked out for everybody. You know, the Yankees got Curtis Granderson, the Diamondbacks were also involved, but this was the deal that really kind of put the Tigers really into that championship level, performance-wise. And this is the beginning of Scherzer really kind of coming into his own as a Cy Young candidate. But that was just like a massive deal, and really the Tigers getting this, ace caliber, Cy Young caliber pitcher to really head their rotation.
Yeah, of course, they made the playoffs 4 out of the 5 years that Scherzer was in Detroit, including a loss in the World Series. All right, second best deal to go down at the winter meetings as well.
I'm going to go back to 2008, CC Sabathia going to the Yankees. Now, we kind of regard that contract now as kind of questionable given how much of an albatross it has been. But let's remember what it did result in. The Yankees, I think it had been 8 years since they had won a World Series, which, in Yankee years is a very, very long time. They wanted to win now. Sabathia, $161 million. Let's remember what happened in 2009. They won the World Series, so that deal did exactly what they wanted it to do. And actually, for the first 4 years of that contract, Sabathia was worth the money.
Yeah, and he was the MVP of the ALCS in 2009. Okay, your number 1 winter meeting deal was what?
Going back to the Detroit Tigers getting Miguel Cabrera.
That was a good one.
At age 24 in 2007. It really was really created all this buzz at the time, but now looking back, I mean, it is even bigger in retrospect. You're looking at a guy who is headed to the Hall of Fame, but to get him from the Marlins at the very beginning of really the prime years of a Hall of Fame career. And, it's Dave Dombrowski, the GM of the Tigers at the time. There is a theme here. He also did get Max Scherzer and that other deal we talked about. And that's why you kind of have to look at the Red Sox now. Dave Dombrowski running the show in Boston now. He's a type of GM where in these, big situations, they're kind of the team, and he's the guy that you don't see coming. You never know. All I'm saying is look out for the Red Sox.
Okay, all eyes are going to be on them as the winter meetings get underway. Of course, Albert, there's a lot of talk this week about the new collective bargaining agreement. Expected to vote on that December 13th, although we expect that the Players Association and Major League Baseball are going to agree on everything, and we'll have 26 years of labor peace between the two parties, which is quite remarkable. But with all the changes and all of the new rules with the CBA, is there still one thing out there that you wish would get done?
Well, I think addressing the pace of play problem is still a very big issue for baseball. And you look at where Major League Baseball is at right now. The ratings this postseason were very good. How much of that was due to the Cubs? But you still had games going on till midnight, 12:30. And, this is still a very big problem for a sport that really still has trouble tapping into that younger demographic. And there's an opportunity here for baseball. You look at the NFL's ratings. If they want to close the gap, well, they need to make changes to the game. And these games are just too long. So maybe some adjustments, you can talk about a pitch clock, maybe something more radical like automated intentional walks, or, limiting the number of pitching changes. And I think that pace of play is at the top of the list of things that they really need to address.
Albert Chen, appreciate it. We're talking baseball in December. It's good stuff. Thanks. All right, for most leagues, the fantasy football playoffs start next week. So if you need some advice for that final push to the fantasy postseason, here's our own Michael Beller.
It's the final week of the typical fantasy regular season. Playoff berths and regular season championships hang in the balance. We'll help you make the right decisions so you can take home some hardware and make sure your season doesn't end on Sunday. Get Kirk Cousins in your lineup. He's the only quarterback in the league in the top 5 in pass attempts, yards, and yards per attempt. That's the holy trinity for quarterbacks, the perfect mix of opportunity and efficiency. He may be dealing with a tough draw against the Cardinals in Arizona this week, but Cousins has earned our trust. He's a worthy starter every week. Stay away from Eli Manning. Despite throwing 12 touchdowns in his last 4 games, he has had fewer than 260 yards in all of those contests and totaled just 6.42 YPA. Manning's sporadic efficiency this season makes him a hard quarterback to trust in the harsh environment of Heinz Field. Think of him as a mid-tier QB2. Keep your faith in Tim Hightower this week. The over-under on Lions Saints is a robust 53.5, making this game fertile ground for fantasy scoring. The Saints backfield committee has not been the death knell for Hightower or Mark Ingram. Rather, both players have found success while netting 15-plus touches per game. Any player getting that sort of volume in this game is a worthy fantasy starter. Terrence West should be firmly rooted on fantasy benches. He has fewer than 10 carries in 2 of his last 5 games and has rushed for fewer than 4 yards per carry in 4 of those contests. Kenneth Dixon played 8 more snaps than him last week and is clearly the more explosive back. With Dixon hogging obvious passing downs and making inroads on early downs as well, West isn't likely to get the volume he needs to show up in meaningful fantasy fashion. Sammy Watkins made his return from IR last week, catching 3 passes for 80 yards. He's worth a play this week, with the Bills insisting he will see an increase in snap rate on Sunday. His long play was a 62-yard reception from Tyrod Taylor down the right sideline. The burst he showed on that play was as sure a sign as any that the foot injury is finally behind him. Watkins may have disappointed his owners this year, but he's set to end the season with a flourish. The Raiders, his opponents, have allowed the 7th most fantasy points per game to receivers. Kelvin Benjamin belongs on your bench. It's not just because of a matchup with the Seahawks, though that obviously doesn't help. After a torrid start to this season, Benjamin has a lackluster 35 catches, 537 yards, and 2 touchdowns in his last 9 games. That comes out to a paltry 7.3 standard league points per game, which has him rubbing elbows in the ranks with Adam Thielen and Pierre Garçon. The brand name is falling short. Let's go back to that great environment expected in Lions Saints at tight end. Kobe Fleener has done his best work at home this season, which isn't a surprise given Drew Brees' exploits at the Superdome. The Lions, meanwhile, have allowed the most fantasy points per game to tight ends this year. This is the sort of context in which Fleener should thrive. Vance McDonald is getting some love this week based on Colin Kaepernick's play and a matchup with the Bears. Neither of those change the fact that McDonald is a touchdown-dependent player, reaching the 60-yard mark just once this season without the benefit of a long trip to the end zone. The over-under in 49ers Bears is just 43.5, and the Bears are small favorites, suggesting this might not be the Kaepernick bonanza so many are expecting. Finally, it's a brutal week on the defense stream, with many of the widely available defenses facing strong offenses or too bad to trust no matter the matchup. We'll focus our attention on the Packers defense, which welcomes Brock Osweiler and the Texans to Green Bay. When in doubt, I'll trust a coordinator like Dom Capers getting a week to prepare for an Osweiler-led offense. That'll do it for the Week 13 edition of Stardom or Sit 'em. I'll be back with you here right next week for waiver wire advice. Until then, this is Michael Beller, wishing you good luck this weekend.
Looking ahead to the conference championship game starting tonight, our own Brian Hamilton joins me now. Brian, 4th-ranked Washington takes on number 8 Colorado for the Pac-12 championship. Are the Huskies the most vulnerable of all the favorites playing this weekend?
I think they are. I think it's maybe because they're just playing the best team than anybody else is playing. I mean, obviously Wisconsin and Penn State in the Big Ten title game are 2 pretty evenly matched teams. But Washington is facing a Colorado team that's had its own breakthroughs. It's a top 10 team in its own right. They've got a really nicely balanced attack, a lot of good mojo going for them. And if you sort of compare Washington and Clemson, to me, Clemson woke up. Clemson lost that game to Pittsburgh, maybe had coasted a little bit through the season, walked too much of a tightrope, winning close games that maybe they could have lost earlier in the season that finally caught up to them. They have been playing amazingly well since. And if you're going to have a hot Clemson team going into play Virginia Tech in the ACC title game, I'm putting a lot of stock in Clemson. So Washington, to me, is just playing the best team, has the toughest game to win this weekend. I think they will win, but I don't think it'll be easy, and that's why they might be in a little bit of danger.
Let's dive a little bit more into that Clemson-Virginia Tech game. If the Hokies are going to pull the upset, what's the roadmap? How can they do it?
Yeah, I think you've got to basically somehow win the line of scrimmage against a really tough Clemson defensive front. I mean, those guys, I think they're third in the nation or tied for second in the nation in tackles for loss. They changed the line of scrimmage up front as Clemson's defensive front. Virginia Tech's going to have to either make them run around a little bit, spread it out a little bit, try to get those guys moving side to side instead of front and back. Other than that, they're going to have to force Clemson into some offensive mistakes. I mean, you're going to have to hope that Deshaun Watson throws a couple picks your way. His interception numbers, we talk a lot about Deshaun Watson not being as efficient a quarterback as he was last year. The numbers look pretty much the same. He's pretty much the same guy he was. But if you force him into a couple mistakes, make Clemson play catch up with you, and then maybe hold your own against that line of scrimmage, or at least get those guys moving east-west instead of north-south, that's probably your roadmap for Virginia Tech.
Okay, Brian, the big question. If one or both of those games ends in an upset, what will the final college football playoff rankings look like on Sunday?
Well, I think you're going to have Michigan and then the winner of the Big Ten title game. I mean, if you have both those teams losing, I think it's going to be a very Big Ten heavy playoff scenario. Colorado is going to have an argument to make, obviously, as a champion, but Michigan beat them. And that's going to be that would be a very, very controversial thing to have a Michigan team in the playoff with 2 losses, no league championship, and no real good road wins to speak of. But I think what you see right now in terms of how the committee views what Michigan did this year, hard for me to believe that if both Washington and Clemson lose, you don't see Michigan and the Big Ten winner from Saturday night in the playoff. If one of those teams loses, my guess is the winner of Wisconsin-Penn State probably jumps into the playoff over Colorado, unless Colorado somehow dismantles Washington in super impressive form. So with one of them out, I think you're getting the Big Ten champion in there. With both of them out, you might see 3 Big Ten teams in the playoff.
Wow, that would be huge for that Big Ten conference. What about Oklahoma State? Both teams are 9-2, and this is effectively the Big 12 championship game. Is there any way that either of those teams gets in, or the winner of Bedlam gets in?
It's hard for me to see, just because if the committee thinks that they are behind all these teams right now, I don't know what beating each other would do to make you jump over 4 or 5 teams that the committee deems superior at this point, who also have a chance to win some pretty high-profile games this weekend. I get the argument from Oklahoma. I mean, they played Houston, they played Ohio State, they went out and did what the committee asks you to do, to play a tough non-conference schedule. They didn't have D.D. Westbrook at 100% for those games. I understand Oklahoma's stance that they're maybe really a one-loss team, because that Central Michigan the Central Michigan game wasn't exactly the smoothest of endings, and they probably should have won that game if it wasn't for the referees. But, in the position they're in right now, I don't know that Oklahoma State beating Oklahoma or Oklahoma beating Oklahoma State is enough to bump them up against all these other teams that are going to have chances to win against quality opponents as well.
Yeah, either way, it's going to be a fun-filled weekend packed with college football. Brian will be at the Big Ten championship game. We're looking forward to that one between Penn State and Wisconsin. Brian Hamilton, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Maggie.
All right, let's take an even closer look at the college football conference championship games with this. This is SI Now's Weekend Drive presented by Toyota. Let's go places. This week, we are highlighting some of college football's championship games, which are certain to impact the playoff landscape. First, we head to the Georgia Dome in Atlanta to see Alabama take on Florida for the SEC crown. Gators coach Jim McElwain knows his defense will have its hands full stopping rookie sensation Jalen Hurts.
the thing this guy does is he brings that 12th man to the game, and here's the thing I enjoy watching him is how calm he is. You know, as a freshman, nothing bothers him, and yet when they need a big play, he's the one who gives it to them. And you know, that's a credit to what they're doing offensively as coaches. You know, they've got pretty good players around them too.
A win on Saturday will give Nick Saban his 7th SEC title. Next, we travel to Santa Clara, California for a Pac-12 showdown between Colorado and Washington. Buffalo's quarterback Sefo Lufau ranks 5th in the Pac-12 in quarterback rating and likes being the underdog in this game.
I don't know if there is pressure. You know, I don't think anyone's picking us to win. I don't think anyone wants us to win. That's totally okay. You know, we know what we're capable of. We know what UW's capable of, and we just have to go out there and play, I wouldn't say a flawless game, but to beat a very good team like UW, you just got to come out there and you have to play very well in all 3 phases, in defense, offense, and special teams. And so, you know, especially on offense, we have to be a lot better this week than we have in the past couple weeks.
One note, Colorado's only 2 losses this season came in games when Lufau was injured. Lastly, we travel south to Orlando for the ACC championship game between reigning champ Clemson and Virginia Tech. Hokies defensive tackle Woody Barron has 4.5 sacks on the season, but will he be able to pressure Clemson's star quarterback Deshaun Watson?
I think when we're talking about this game that we have coming up this weekend, you see obviously a talented player in Deshaun. You know, I think we have been able to get after the quarterback in certain instances over the season. As much as you can get back there, it's a benefit for the team. So I think our biggest challenge comes this weekend, and you know, that's easy to see.
This will be the biggest challenge of the year for the Hokies defense. Clemson's passing attack leads the ACC with over 4,000 yards through the air and 38 touchdowns. And that's what's in store for this weekend. It's going to be a fun weekend, that's for sure. And that's going to do it for this Friday episode of SI Now. We'll see you right back here on Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern with reaction to all of the college football championship games and the new college football playoff rankings. But until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you here on Monday.